Told him they're hungry out there, Ron. Come on, cut it short, man. We got daylights burning out there. Oh, man, thank you for coming out tonight. It's an honor to be in front of a gathering of Republicans that share the values and the virtues that made America a great country. Now, you might just kind of ask yourself a little bit, so what's a Texan driving 1,200 miles out here to come to California for? I mean, it's, you know, and quite simply, here's the answer, because Texas stands with you. Ron, we stand with you in your efforts to restore Republicans to their rightful place of leadership in all levels of government in the Golden State. We're here for you, Steve. I'm here to proclaim today that what Ronald Reagan built will not be allowed to be torn down by Nancy Pelosi. That's what I'm here for today. Our nation's not great. Our nation's not great because of the size of our government, but because of the vision and the values of the people that live in America. And we will not relinquish our nation's moral authority to please those leftist elitists that live in those ivory tower institutions. Back home, I often talk about how Texas enjoys competing with California. I tell Arnold all the time, we enjoy competing. We were just talking about that, Senator. I enjoy competing. And we in Texas enjoy competing against California, both on the football field and for jobs and economic growth. And I might add, we're pretty proud here lately. We've had our fair share of success at both. But I also tell my folks back home that it's vital. It's vital that the health of our nation, for the health of our nation, that California maintains a strong economy. We want California to be successful. California is too important to the future of this country. It's important to our national economy. We cannot let this state become bankrupt. And liberal political philosophy of the Democrat Party cannot be allowed to dominate the direction of this state. You've heard from 3 states tonight. You've heard from 3 states, California, Florida, and Texas. We happen to represent collectively 26% of the gross domestic product of this country. If these 3 states were their own country, they would be the 3rd largest economy in the world, larger than China, larger than Germany. And I say this to underscore the fact and the importance of having Republican leadership at all levels of government in these large, important states. They're the engines that drive the economy of America. You know, it wasn't too long ago, it was less than a decade ago, that Texas finally became, out from under, over a century of Democrat control. It was in 2003 that we achieved, not, I might add, by the politics of personal destruction either, what we did in Texas. We practiced what Republicans preach. We stood by our principles, and we were winning the hearts and the minds of the people of that state. This, I happen to believe, is how California and our country do battle to defeat the scourge of liberalism that we face today. We got to stand on principle, Steve. We got to stand up day in and day out and talk to the American people, talk to the people of California about our principles and what we believe in. And this fight must be more than just against the classic tax and spend agenda that the left has always championed. Our fight runs much deeper than that. Our opponents believe that big government is the answer because they have little faith in governance. Their philosophy says that government should do what a man can't or won't do for himself. At its heart, liberalism doesn't flow from compassion, but from cynicism. The belief that Americans are not smart enough to govern their own lives, not smart enough or not passionate enough to help their neighbors in need, wise enough to elect a Democrat in 7 of the last 9 presidential elections. They will think you're smart enough to understand that. You see, theirs is an agenda of arrogance. When they lose at the ballot box, they complain that they failed to get their message out. I think they have the opposite problem. They aren't listening to the message that Americans are telling them. That's the reason they lose elections. Take for instance, it's pretty interesting, this recent religious awakening that has occurred on the left. I mean, you can kind of notice that. Some of the folks that are running for the presidency on the left, after 25 years, they have finally figured out that people of faith have felt a little belittled by their party's leaders and the allies of theirs. So today, they offer these shallow appeals, these syrupy rhetoric to tickle these itching ears that are out there. And I learned a long time ago, Thomas, that I would rather watch a sermon played out in a person's life than listen to one. And while they're out there playing and having the good game going on, their buddies on the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco have been doing their dirty work for them. Striking down the words "under God" in the Pledge of Allegiance, trying to sanitize our public discourse of not only reverence for, but the mere mention of the Almighty. Here again, we see how little faith the left has in people. It's as if the mere mention of God is so compelling that it might influence their atheist friends to start believing in something besides themselves. I asked somebody, I said, whatever happened to reasoned discourse? I mean, what's wrong with our children in schools being exposed to different cultures and different faith traditions? What's wrong with that? If they're so proud of their secular humanism and its worldview, why won't they allow the simple-minded views of the uneducated masses to be lined up next to their philosophy of self and all of its wisdom, and just let the people decide? Why won't they do that? And Ron, since when did the field of science become the sole purview of left-wing politicians? I don't know about you, but I've heard Al Gore talk about man-made global warming so much I'm starting to think that his mouth may be the leading source of all this supposedly deadly carbon dioxide. I'm thinking that may be the problem. The fact of the matter is, almost every day there is another scientist that leaves the global warming bandwagon. But, the fact is, you won't read it in the mass media out there because they've already invested in one side of that story. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be good stewards of our environment. We should. I'm just saying that when politics hijacks science, it quells true scientific debate, and you can have dire consequences for the future of this country and for this world. Look, in this political climate that we find ourselves in today, Democrats aren't the only threat. The reason we lost our majority in Congress is not because of our ideas were lost upon the American people or that our ideas have lost their luster. It's because our leaders lost their way. That's why we lost. Amen, sis. When Republicans morph into these big spending, favor trading politicians, voters will just go back to voting for the party that they know wrote the book on how to do that, and that's the Democrats. That's what they did. You know, it is sad. It is a sad state of affairs when liberals campaign like Republicans to get elected and Republicans govern like liberals to be loved. That's a bad day. We need to hold the line. We need to hold the line on what it means to be a Republican, being conservative. If you see a candidate who wants to tax like a Democrat, regulate like a Democrat, educate like a Democrat, they should not have the honor of having the name Republican bestowed upon them. Stop them. Amen. If the Republican Party wants to regain its rightful place, we must get back to being fiscally conservative and fiscal conservative to the root. And let me tell you, it doesn't just need to happen in Washington, D.C. It needs to happen in Austin, Texas, in Sacramento, California, and every other state capital where Republicans are proud of those conservative, fiscal, conservative roots. At every level, we need true conservatives that'll fight for deeper tax cuts, greater spending restraint, and increased educational opportunity. This may be California's convention, but the battle you face is one that we all have joined. 2008 is our opportunity to beat back the tide of liberal advances and restore order. If you need only one challenge, if you need only one thing to get you out of bed every morning next year, make it this one. Let's make sure that Nancy Pelosi is just an asterisk in the history books of this country. And if you need a little bit more motivation, if you need just a little bit more motivation to keep up the fight over the next 14 months, hang your hat on this one. We must move heaven and earth to make sure that there is never another Clinton back in the White House. Amen? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That'll work. Woo! Here. Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I know and I realize that the war on terror is not popular in some corners and some quarters of this country, but I believe it's right and I believe it's just. And I believe that thoughtful people will agree with my concern about the impact another Clinton administration would have on the men and women who today stand between us and the terrorists who would destroy America. Every day that passes without an attack on America by the people that hate us is a credit to the men and women of the armed forces, the intelligence community, those who guard our border, the terrorist element in the Middle East hates our way of life. They hate us. and even with the battle raging in Iraq and Afghanistan, we cannot turn a blind eye to the regime in Iran that would obliterate the only democracy in the Middle East if they are given the chance. We cannot turn our back on them. It is no big secret that the Iranian arms and the know-how are finding their way across the border of Iraq. They are threatening the lives of our allies and, more importantly, our own fighting men and women. And in Texas, we're looking for ways to send a message to the dangerous leaders of Iran who are racing full speed toward a nuclear capability. If Texas were its own country, by the way, Ron, we were at one time, our economy would be the 10th largest in the world. We don't set our own foreign policy, but we can determine how we will invest billions of dollars in our state pension funds. Just like California, we recently said that we would not invest in companies that profit from the genocidal regimes in the Sudan. And I believe we must make a similar stand against Iran. I want Texas to send a powerful legislative session, or legislative message next session. But I want to be crystal clear about my message today. I believe that any company that is doing business directly or indirectly with Iran might as well be selling arms to those terrorists that are trying to kill our soldiers in Iraq today. Pick a side. Who are you going to be for? The message needs to be very clear to those companies. There are no half measures here. There is no room to parse your words. Either you do business with our enemies or you don't. Pick a side. You put a nuclear bomb in the hands of one Middle East maniac, and it could be the destruction of millions of people living in Israel. So we're going to stand. We're going to stand with our friends in Israel. That's what friends do. They stand up for one another. Israel has stood with us for decades in the face of tyranny, and we must stand with them today by pressuring Iran and the other agents of destruction in the Middle East. That is the type of noble behavior in what the Republican Party has been all about. We are the party that believes in freedom. We are the party that believes in life. We are the party that believes in fiscal responsibility. We are the party that believes in moral values. And despite what you may have read in the news here lately, I assure you that we are still the party of family values, not the party of scandal. And I will suggest to you that the integrity of our party matters more than any one person's hold on an office. And so I'll say this. If you aspire to lead, but you cannot live out the values that we hold dear, you need to step aside. That's the message that we need to be sending. We got to reconnect. We got to reconnect to the values that made our party and our nation and a great and a wonderful place. We got to restore conservative principles back to the basis of our approach to governing. We know that our conservative philosophy is the right way to govern, and it's the best way to lead. And if anyone needs proof of the effectiveness of the conservative governing principles, I'll ask you to look no further than the Lone Star State. I'm going to brag this a little bit here. just a few years ago, we had a daunting, we're not anywhere near as big as y'all are, so just remember here, this is pretty daunting, $10 billion budget shortfall. But we prioritized. Just like you do at your house. When the economy turns down, that's what you do. You prioritize. You say, here's what's important. Here's where we've got to spend some money. And we did that on education and health care in the state of Texas. And we made ends meet without having a tax hike. It had been easy for us to show up down there and say, oh my God, we didn't know it was going to be $10 billion. We're going to have to raise your taxes. But for the first time since Reconstruction, in the 1870s, there was a Republican speaker, a Republican lieutenant governor, a Republican governor, both the Senate and the House in Republican hands for the first time since Reconstruction. And we said, we ran as Republicans and conservatives, and we must live to those principles. And that's what we did in that state. For the first time, every year, Senator, every year in Texas history, our budget had gone up. Under Democrat-controlled legislatures and governors, every 2 years our budget went up. Until there was a Republican governor and a Republican lieutenant governor and a Republican speaker and majorities in both of those houses, and the first time since World War II that budget went down. That's what the people want and demand from Republican leadership. We took on the personal injury trial lawyers in the state of Texas in 2003. We reformed our medical malpractice laws. We had major tort reform in the state of Texas. And with that medical liability reform in place, Texas has suddenly become the destination of choice for doctors all across this country. We now have a backlog of applications for doctors who want to practice medicine in Texas without the constant fear of a frivolous lawsuit being filed. We protected the sanctity of a sacred institution in the state of Texas, the institution of marriage, by passing the Defense of Marriage Act. In fact, I would argue that under Republican leadership, Texas is the most pro-life, pro-family state in the nation. We passed a law that protects a parent's rights to be involved in their minor daughter's major decisions by requiring parental consent before an abortion can be performed. We prohibit the use of taxpayers' dollars to support abortion clinics, and we spend millions of dollars every year to help women seek alternatives like adoption. That's where we need to be focused in a Republican Party. Our economy is one of the fastest growing in the country. We've had over 800,000 net new jobs created in the last 4 years, and we have been consistently ranked as the best place to do business in America. And I know Arnold's probably slipped off. But we just passed California last year as the #1 exporting state in the nation. Look, and I say all these things not to just be up here and be a braggart about Texas. I know. And I do that every now and then, I admit. But I tell you this because it's proof that conservative Republican leadership and Republican principles can work. And they do work. And we got to stand up for them day in and day out. What we have done in Texas didn't happen by accident. It happened because people elected Republican leadership. They listened to what we said, then we did what we said we would do. Those reforms happened because Republicans did not redefine, abandon, or waver from our philosophy. We didn't listen to the skies falling screams of our liberal friends or the over-the-top criticism from the media. We simply did what we said we would do. And the results, I will suggest to you, speak for themselves. As the governor of Texas, I make no apologies for being an optimistic conservative who is pro-jobs, pro-growth, pro-family, and pro-life, and neither should anyone in this room. You ought not be afraid of that. As a Republican, I will admit to you, and I confess, that I long for the days when Ronald Reagan reminded us of the goodness of the human spirit. As Republicans, we must ensure that government doesn't discourage work by punishing success. And we must make sure that the price of government doesn't grow faster than our wages. Government shouldn't loom larger in our lives than our freedom. My belief is in the person who invests in their savings, putting their time into their new business. That truck driver that's out there working long hours, the road all night. That wheat farmer that's working mighty long hours to keep our food supply going. Small business owner who makes a payroll. See, they're the real quiet engines of progress in this country. Men and women who pay taxes, who build communities. They're the ones that make the American dream possible. Their status as an American, it may stretch back for generations, or it may be as late as a recent citizenship ceremony, but either way, the American dream should not be entrusted to the hands of government. It should be entrusted to their hands. Our party stands for freedom. Freedom to take risk and to enjoy the rewards of those risks. Our party stands for the right to mention the name of God in a public setting without the fear of reprisal. Our party stands for the right to life for the most vulnerable amongst us, the unborn. The left says, trust government. Trust government because the people don't know better. Republicans say, trust the people and the government will work better. That's what we say. In 2008, the other side's going to launch slash and burn campaigns against our candidates. We need to take our message to the people. We need to talk about our bedrock Republican principles of cutting taxes, of reducing spending, of reforming government. And while those on the left are going to demagogue and divide, Republicans need to unite behind our candidates with a positive message of freedom and responsibility and opportunity. I'm not going to be on the ballot, but let me tell you, I'm going to campaign like I'm on the ballot, because whether it's in Texas or it's in California or anywhere else, I'm going to be out there spreading the word about what is at stake here. And I encourage you to do the same thing. Giving everything that you can give, your time, your resources, your good name, to the Republican campaigns. Because let me tell you, the future of America, I will suggest to you, the future of this world is at stake. And it needs to be Republicans that are there leading.